I invite you to stand with me for the gospel. The Holy Gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ, according to John, chapter 6, verse 1 through verse 15. Jesus went to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, also called the Sea of Tiberias. A large crowd kept following him because they saw the signs that he was doing for the sick. Jesus went up the mountain and sat down there with his disciples. Now the Passover, the festival of the Jews, was near. When he looked up and saw a large crowd coming toward him, Jesus said to Philip, "Where are we to buy bread for these people to eat?" He said this to test him, for he himself knew what he was going to do. Philip answered him, 6 months' wages would not be enough to buy bread for each of them to get a little. One of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said to him, "There is a boy here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. But what are they among so many people?" Jesus said, "Make the people sit down." Now there was a great deal of grass in the place, so they sat down, about 5,000 in all. Then Jesus took the loaves, and when he had given thanks, he distributed to them, to those who were seated, and also the fish, as much as they wanted. When they were satisfied, he told his disciples, "Gather up the fragments left over, so that nothing may be lost." So they gathered them up, and from the fragments of the 5 barley loaves left by those who had eaten, they filled 12 baskets. When the people saw the sign that he had done, they began to say, "This is indeed the prophet who is to come into the world." When Jesus realized that they were about to come and take him by force to make him king, he withdrew again to the mountain by himself. This is the gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ, the word of God for the people of God.
Thanks be to God.
Please be seated. Well, this is a very familiar story, the story of the feeding of the multitude. How many of you know this story, like almost by heart? Yeah, or at least you're familiar with it, right? This is the kind of story that, this Bible story, that we hear in Sunday school and in vacation Bible school and all sorts of times. So if you've had even a little bit of contact with the church, you kind of know at least a little bit about the story of Jesus feeding the 5,000. Now, I remember for myself hearing this story as a kid a lot of different times, but one time that really said, well, have y'all ever seen a flannel board? You know what a flannel board is? Yeah. It's those felt boards where you put little characters on and they stick, and it's really fun. For some reason, I have in my mind this one time when I don't know how old I was or what church it was in, but I remember hearing this story with a flannel board, and I was so fascinated with this one little piece of the flannel board. It was a little basket, and it had a cutout, and you could stick little fish in it. I just thought it was the coolest thing. It's a familiar story. And there's a good reason for it to be so familiar. It is in all 4 of the Gospels. This story appears in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. The details are a little bit different. There's maybe some different details about the environment, the number of people fed, things like that. But the story appears in all 4 Gospels. And Matthew, Mark, and Luke's version of the story is pretty similar to each other. There's a fancy theology word we use called the Synoptic Gospels. And that's for Matthew, Mark, and Luke. We call them the Synoptic Gospels because they all seem to kind of be based on a common set of stories, a common source, and they have a lot of similarities. And so Matthew, Mark, and Luke, their version of the story is pretty similar amongst them. And John's version of the story is a little bit different. One of the things that's so interesting about John's version of this story is that John's version has so little detail in it. There's just not a whole lot of detail. But there is one detail unique to John's version of the story that we're going to talk about here in just a few minutes. There's this one really interesting detail that only John has. The other 3 don't have it. Now, to fully understand what's going on in this story, you really do have to kind of look at all 4 versions. And you have to kind of take the synoptic version of the story and sort of like superimpose superimpose it on the John version of the story to get all of the details, to kind of understand exactly what's going on. And so I want to do that real quick just to kind of lay the scene. Because we need to understand what's going on if we're going to fully appreciate what Jesus does in this miraculous feeding. So in the synoptic version, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, the story takes place in a desolate place, or a isolated place, or a remote place. That's kind of the way different translations might word it. In other words, it's off away from civilization. Right? It's kind of like if we all went over and camped out in the Smokies or something. It's away from stuff. And the other detail in Matthew, Mark, and Luke that we don't get in John is the time frame. In Matthew, Mark, and Luke, it's going to get dark soon. Night is falling. And so, in other words, no one is going to leave and go run through McDonald's drive-thru on their way home. Okay? It's not a situation where if you don't get enough at the potluck, that you can always grab a burger on the way home. That's not happening. The other thing that we have to remember is that streetlights hadn't been invented yet. So, in other words, if you were out in a remote location and it got dark, you were camping. Okay, there's no light to get home. It's dark. You're staying there, and if you're stuck there and you haven't eaten, then you're going to camp hungry. So we have to kind of understand that that's the case to get a picture of exactly how distressed this situation really is. It's actually a little bit dangerous, right? Because there's a whole bunch of people here who are going to be stuck out in the middle of nowhere with nothing to eat if something isn't done. And that's the context that the synoptics give us for this story. And in that context, the disciples are the ones who bring up the problem. So in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, the way the story goes is the disciples come to Jesus and they're like, Jesus, there's a lot of people, there's no food, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? It's kind of, the disciples are kind of panicky. And Jesus is like, chill, I got this. That's the synoptic version. Now, in John's version of the story, it's a little bit different because who speaks first? Jesus. I love this. This is so cool. So Jesus speaks first. He nudges Philip. Hey, Philip, a lot of people there. How you going to feel? And then in parentheses in the Bible, some parentheses, he knew what he was going to do. He just said this to test, which I love, because it's like Jesus is so mischievous. He's just like, I'm going to see what Philip says. It's great. Jesus knows what he's going to do, but he invites the disciples into the decision-making process. Now, another difference between the synoptics and this is the disciples and synoptics are both panicky and kind of dopey. Like the disciples, in most of the Gospels, most of John too, but especially in this story in the synoptics, the disciples are like, oh, gee, Jesus, I don't know what we're going to do. In John, the disciples are a little bit more savvy, let's say. Philip doesn't necessarily run around with his hair on fire. He just says, well, Jesus, I'm doing the math here, and it looks like we don't have enough money to get even enough bread for them to each have a bite, let alone a meal. Now, Andrew, he goes into problem-solving mode. He's like, Jesus, I found a guy. This little boy here, he's got lunch. Maybe we can do something with that? This boy. How about this boy? Now, this is that detail in John that is not in any of the other versions of the story. The little boy only shows up in John's version. And I have thought a lot about the boy. A lot about this boy. So, John tells us that there are 5,000 men at least, so at least 5,000 people here, who all walked up a mountain to hear Jesus teach. And nobody packed a lunch? Seriously? Not even a protein bar. Those guys didn't have my money. Well, I got there with a protein bar, a milkshake, an extra protein bar in case I need another one. Anyway. Nobody has anything to eat except this little boy. And I'm like, so that's a smart kid, right? Where did he get the food? I have puzzled that day for very young children to travel on their own, to maybe go to work, to earn a little money to help support the family, or to take little day trips to visit relatives. It could be that he was going off to work, or maybe going on a little trip to visit Aunt Sue over in a different village, and his mother had given him a little bit of lunch so he could make the trip with relative comfort and ease. That could be. And maybe he saw the crowd of people following Jesus. He's like, I wonder what kids are. I wonder what that is. He just kind of wandered off and got distracted and ended up there with Jesus. That's possible. Or it could be, and I think this is more likely, it could be that it wasn't his lunch at all, and that perhaps he was a servant boy. Because perhaps one of the more well-off people in the crowd had brought their servant with them, and he was responsible for looking after this person's lunch. And if that's the case, you can imagine that there would be severe consequences for losing, if you pardon the expression, losing his lunch. We don't know for sure. It could have been any number of reasons why this kid, this lad, this little boy, has a lunch. But I think that no matter what the reason might be, we can all agree that it would not have been easy for him to hand over his food, right? It couldn't possibly have been easy for him to hand over his food in the way that he did. But he does it. He does it in an act of absolute trust. And this is where we kind of get to, I think, a really significant thematic difference between the way Matthew, Mark, and Luke tell the story and the point they're trying to make for us, and the way John tells the story and the point he's trying to make for us. Matthew, Mark, and Luke focus on the disciples and their need to fully understand who Jesus is. The story in the Synoptic Gospels is really about the disciples learning that Jesus can handle these types of things, learning to have faith in Jesus for who he is and what he can do. That's an important lesson. And I don't think John ignores that theme, but what John does is he layers on top of it an additional theme. He adds the importance of faithfulness. From faith to faithfulness. Because the boy becomes an iconic representation of giving with total trust, with utter selfishness, and with absolute surrender to Jesus. The boy, in a very real sense, gives up everything to Jesus. He gives up everything he has, even though it is only such a small amount. It's a little tiny bit of food, but oh my goodness, what Jesus does with it. 5 loaves, 2 minnows, not even a whole can of sardines, y'all. 5,000 people are fed. It doesn't take much, but it does take everything for Jesus to do the miraculous work that he has to do. It didn't take but 5 loaves and 2 fish to feed a multitude, but they were 5 loaves and 2 fish given up willingly to Jesus with complete trust that he could do something with it. You know, how often do we think about what we don't have? I know I think about what I don't have, like, on a daily basis, right? Like a Ferrari. And still, no one's given me one. I don't get it. We often think about what we don't have or how little we have. And how paltry it is, and how powerless and vulnerable we are. That's on the top of our minds a lot. That's human nature, right? But this story tells us what God can do with anything paltry when it's given to him. When it's given with trust and surrender. Because that's what God's doing. He's doing miracles in us and through us in the world. He's doing it with our lives. Our lives are the raw materials of miracles, just waiting for the touch of the Master's hand to be transformed into way, way, way more than we ever dreamed they could be. God is ready to use us to do more than we can ask or think or even imagine. All he's waiting for is for us to give ourselves up to him so that we can be transformed and used by him and for him. It doesn't take much, but it does take everything. It took me a long time. Well, I'm still getting it. I'm not going to say I've gotten it. But it took me a long time to really understand that concept of surrender. I was called to ministry at a very young age, and my answer was a resounding nope. Not interested. And I spent a good couple of decades avoiding God's call to me and avoiding giving myself up to what God had for my life. And there were many times along the way when God would continue to prod me and reach out to me and call to me. And I remember one in particular. It was about 10 minutes to midnight on a summer evening. And I was at the Central train station in Milan, Italy. And it was bustling, there were people all around, and I was just like crying. Because I had missed the last train home. And this is very early on in my stay. I did not speak Italian very well at all. I had zero money. I had no money. I had no resources. I had no idea what I was going to do, except that I was probably going to be sleeping with some fellas who looked pretty unsavory. They'd not seen a shower in like a minute. And I remember, this is when the reality of my situation, the danger of my situation, really started to sink in. So when I went up to a police officer, and I have no idea why I thought he'd be receptive to this idea, but I went up to a police officer and I said, hey, in my best Italian, and he figured out pretty quickly I wasn't Italian, and he spoke a little English. I said, hey, I'm going to sleep here tonight. Where's the best place to bunk down for the night? And his eyes got wide as saucers. He said, here? No, you're not sleeping here. You will die. Don't do that. That's a really bad idea. And that's when it really sank in. I remember to this day picking up this payphone and figuring out how to call collect on an Italian payphone and calling my mom like you did. Mom, somehow, she managed to make a couple phone calls and found someone to come pick me up in Milan. And I was safe. I had never felt so vulnerable and so small. I don't know if I've ever felt that way again in my whole life. It was a deep moment of just realizing exactly how limited my own resources are. And in that moment, I remember hearing even then, feeling even then, God reaching out to me, hearing God's voice, however faintly, calling to me, saying, come to me and lay your burden down. Take my burden on you. It's light. It's easy. It's good for you. In your own strength, you've landed yourself in a pretty big pickle. Come to me. Give up to me and let me use you. Now, it still took me a number of years after that experience. And I really only understand it in retrospect. At the time, I shook it off, right? Continued on with my life. But over the years, God has continued to reach out and to call to me and to invite me to surrender myself to him so that he can use me to further his kingdom on earth as it is in heaven. That story's, the point isn't me. The point is what God can and will do with the smallest of gifts. I don't have a lot to offer. Kind of like Hamilton. I don't have a dollar to my name, a dollar of fame, a truth to command. All I've got is what? My tolerance for pain and my top-notch brain. Medium-notch brain. point is not what I have to give. The point's not what you have to give. The point is what God can do with what we give him. God is waiting to use us to transform the world. And all that is required is for us to give ourselves to him. It doesn't take much, but it does take everything. It does take our willing gift of ourselves so that Jesus can use what we give him to do miracles. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.